My name is Craig. I work here at Golden Wings Museum. The Collings Foundation, just a quick background, the Collings Foundation have been coming out to this area for about 14 or 15 years through the Twin Cities area, and we're fortunate they wanted to come back again this year and share the aircraft and the history. And one of the aspects of this event is Damian here, who works up at North Metro TV, a local cable station, has been working on a series of aviation 26-minute or series programs, and he has created the first one of 7?
Of 8, yeah.
Of 8, and we were fortunate to capture a couple of World War II crewmen, Bob Clemens and Vince.
And Vince couldn't make it unfortunately today, but you'll get to know him a little bit in the video. I actually met him last year at this event, so thank you guys for doing this.
So from this event that we've been doing, we've been able to stem off onto other programs, and Damian has created this movie, so we wanted you to see it. That's on YouTube, and that's about it so far.
It's on our station and on YouTube, and yeah.
And so once we thought we'd run the movie for about 26 or 28 minutes, and then afterwards we'll get Bob up. You can have questions about the production, about the process, about the other series that are coming, and then we can talk to Bob. So enjoy the movie.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to talk about?
No. Thank you guys for coming here to watch this. We tried to make it as entertaining as possible. We have 2 great guys, Bob Clemens and Vince Parker, who can tell amazing stories. We try to put it together in an entertaining way, and also preserving this history, because these guys, we're losing them 700 to 1,000 a day. They're World War II veterans, so this is really important historical stuff. So please enjoy the film.
Still the same old story. The 8th gets all the glory. The 15th has to die. You must remember this. The bullets don't always miss. Somebody has to die. The odds are always too damn high. Fight so hard. Now 110s and 210s knocking at your gate. Come on, aerial gunner, shoot down a certain rate. Come on, bombardier, salvo, don't be late, the target's passing by. It's still the same old story. The 8th gets all the glory. The 15th has to die.
What do you think? Wow. Thank you, Damian. Thank you, Bob. So, if Damian wants to come on up, Bob will join us.
I think Olga's
and the rest of Damian's crew will get some mics going.
You can sit here.
Oh, thank you.
Okay.
Well, I just wanted to say thank you guys for coming out and watching this. I work at the North Metro TV station here in Blaine. We did this without a budget, of course. So it did take some time, and we filmed about 8 terabytes of footage so far. It's not all World War II, but we have several more episodes coming up based around people who are World War II veterans like Bob and Vince that you just saw. And really, we just wanted to preserve history in an entertaining way, and to create some original programming for our station. And really, we owe a lot to our veterans, and we really wanted to honor them and try to make something special and entertaining. So yeah, thank you guys for coming to watch it.
Any questions about the production? I know I had one question. How long did it take just to put this segment together? I know you started filming a year ago, but how many hours did it take, guess, to put just this segment together?
This is Olga. She's one of my main editors, so she can help answer that question as well. But just the logging of the footage, we did shoot a couple of interviews with each of them. A bunch of B-roll. Olga and I both got to fly in the B-17. We saw some of that footage that we shot, and we were shooting a lot of episodes all at the same time. So it's hard to say because we're logging the footage. But how many hours do you think we spent?
Oh God, I don't know. A lot.
And I think the other hard part, obviously, is finding copyright-free images of B-17 flying during World War II that we don't have to pay for. And so it's not something you can just Google. Unfortunately, that took a long time to find footage that we could use that fit with our stories, and was free to use because we had no money. So yeah, I would guess probably over 100 hours.
How big a budget do you have?
Zero. It's a zero budget. Yeah, no budget.
All volunteers?
Yeah, well, we are paid staff members. I think Olga gets paid $10 an hour.
Big money.
Yeah, so she's getting rich. Hardly covers her gas. Yeah, so no budget. We have our own equipment. It's just our time that we put into it.
How much time had you, how many hours had you put in?
Well, this is going to be an 8-part miniseries, and I have my other job, to do there, so they let me kind of just do it on the side. And we've probably put in over the last year, hundreds of hours probably. And we're working on Olga and Dale and I are working on a couple new episodes. One's going to be pilots of World War II. We just interviewed another pilot here today that we had a chance to meet, named James Heiner. And also we're going to do a tour of the Golden Wings Museum. Hopefully you guys got a chance to see that with all those airplanes that Craig, he kind of watches over that museum, and Greg Herrick has. So those are the next 2 episodes coming out, but we have some hoping to do one in Vietnam, Civil Air Patrol. We have some general aviation stuff with John Marzatelli. What other episodes do we have coming up?
We have Marv.
Oh yeah, Marv Dahlgren. He was a pilot of World War II and a Corsair pilot. And Larry Bachman was a B-24 pilot. Betty Strophis, who was the last living WASP in Minnesota as well. She's a really interesting character. Greg Herrick, who owns those planes that you saw, those Golden Age aircraft. We probably have a couple episodes on him. Just one in the museum, and one this amazing story of him trying to recover this Sikorsky aircraft that doesn't exist otherwise, and it's on the bottom of a lake in Alaska. And I think we have over 100 hours of footage that was given to us, and we've shot interviews with him as well. So that'll be another episode there.
I got a question for Bob.
Yeah.
You didn't start flying until after D-Day?
Yes, 10 days after D-Day I started.
Wasn't D-Day when they and surrendered?
Oh, no, D-Day was June 6, 1944, and they surrendered in May of 1945.
Okay. So how many flights did you fly?
50. Yes, sir.
Was there ever a time that you thought, I'm not making it home? And if so, who did you think of? Was it people back home? Was it your crew? What?
Well, I had a funny attitude toward God Almighty. I said, I prayed if He got me through this, I'd help Him out when I got home, as if He needed my help. But I thought a lot about my parents. I happen to be an only child, so I think my parents must have gone through a lot when they saw their son, their only kid, go off to war. I remember my dad particularly as he saw me leave. he looked like he'd never see me again, and the probability was pretty good that he wouldn't. And then when he saw me, when I came home, he had a grin from ear to ear. And then we did, he and I did have the privilege of being in business together from when I got out of the Air Force in 1945 till he died very suddenly in 1949. He was only 58 years old. But we had a great time during those four and a half years working together. He was a great guy. You know, that generation really probably should have been the greatest generation, not us, because they went through that Great Depression. I often wonder how my mother, she could stretch a dollar bill from here to the door and back. You know, my dad made $3 a week in the wintertime during the Depression. Oranges were 60 cents a dozen, and I had an orange every day of my life. You know, they did marvelous things. It's amazing how they got through that. And us going through that, I think, trained us very well for what we did during World War II. Discipline was very strict. My mother had to know where I was every 20 minutes. And you better, when she said supper was served at 5 o'clock, you better be there by 4:55 or you're going to get in trouble. I think that was a great time. It wasn't near as bad as the history books portray it, because, you know, we had a wonderful welfare system. You know how the welfare system worked? Neighbors. You know, I don't want to be political, but I think if we had that kind of a welfare system today, we'd be better off, because we send $1 to Washington and 25 cents that comes back. But that welfare system with neighbors was great. Everybody looked out for everybody else. It was a great time to live.
Good question.
I got a question. Damian, you've been working on interviewing for about the last 2 years out at the airport. We've got a lot of vets that you've had the opportunity to spend time with. Why Bob and Vince? You've had Larry, you've had Liz, we've had many vets. What drew you to their story or their combined story for this production?
Well, the way we try to do it is we try to cast a wide net and interview a lot of people, and then find the most interesting stories and the most interesting people and kind of narrow it down. And those two obviously went together very well because they both flew on the same aircraft. We're both in the same Air Force division. And so those were, and it felt like that was the first one I wanted to do. It just felt like it fit so well. And so it's a part of the process is finding people that we can cut with together and have a combined story, that have combined experience, even though that they may have been in a different place or a different time. Like our pilots episode, we have people from 3 different continents, but they all have had similar experiences, so we're able to tie them together that way.
How did you choose how to do the editing? I mean, you know, did you have an outline of what you wanted, or, I mean, you know, it's amazing when you put that stuff
Yeah,
together.
go ahead, Olga.
Segues and stuff.
Well, that's a good question, actually. What we did is we pretty much sat down and we listened through their stories and we cut out pieces that we thought were good. So the stories that you hear, and then we just pieced them together literally from memory, and the way we cut them out and put them together like that, just the way that, but it fits.
Yeah, we organize it, we label each and every clip, of course, and Olga is so good at finding the segues to make the story flow really well, and putting the right B-roll in at the right time. So yeah, that was mostly Olga that did that part of it.
I have a question. And there may not be a rational answer to this, but just from your experience in World War II was kind of a whole different kind of war, but just throughout the years since then, just country after country, all over the world, war after war after war, there's still thousands of wars going on everywhere in the world. Why do we keep doing it? What is the reason that we keep killing each other?
A lot of people accuse us because we fought in war that we like war. Nobody hates war more than we do.
Yeah.
Anybody that's been in it. I have one other personal opinion, and then I'll get back to you. I think the Air Force gets far too much credit. I think we ought to have things like this for people that fought on the ground and on ships. you know, everybody cooperated. There were 16 million of us in World War II, almost all men. And about 1 million of us were in combat. It took 15 million to keep us fighting. But I can't tell you why we keep doing this. I guess, you know, I take the easy way out and I give you one word: politicians. But I can't figure out why we can't learn to get along. But we do have certain people in the world that hate other people, and that's tough. I personally don't have anybody that I hate. If somebody takes an aim at me, I figure that's I've got that coming. I've had a fabulous life since World War II. If my life was described as a card game, I was dealt an awfully good hand.
Did they tell the story?
I think they told it very accurately, yeah. You know, it's very difficult to remember every detail because my mind has changed things. I don't remember very many bad things about my military service. I remember the neat people I met and the good experiences I had. For instance, my pilot was 28 years old. He was 8 years older than me. I had never had a piece of beef except it was burned black because, you know, the only beef we had was some old cow that had quit milking, and they butchered the cow, and you had to really cook it to make it eatable. My pilot took me out in Sioux City, Iowa, and we went to a steakhouse, and he said, "Order it medium." Boy, oh boy, was that something. I told my mother when I went home on leave, and she said, "Listen, you're going to die from that raw meat." Just some of the experiences that we had that were kind of minor, but yet changed our lives. As I mentioned in the film, my dad said, "Son, you left home as a boy and you came back as a man." Only 35 months. That's not very long, but it changes somebody very, very rapidly. And the backup of civilians. I just had something happen again. I went to get a corn dog. The guy gave it to me free. I'm amazed at how people treat us. During the war, it was fabulous. You got in a cab, you went to have dinner someplace, and somebody always paid. I was just amazed at that. And so I try to return that today when I see a serviceman.
Yeah, a B-51 pilot that I knew said that 100 octane gasoline he felt was the determining factor in winning World War II. In your experience, what do you think was the determining factor in winning World War II?
That's a big question, but I'd say the mass production in the United States. I heard a retired general talk about 15 years ago. He was a friend of President Roosevelt's. Excuse me, it was his son that spoke. And President Roosevelt wanted to know something about the Japanese and the Germans, but Congress wouldn't appropriate any money. So between the president and this general, they sent the general to Germany and Japan, and he came back with one story that was significant, and that was that both the Japanese and the Germans thought that we would never could convert our civilian industry to military. Well, you know what happened. Boy, in Willow Run in Detroit, they were producing one B-24 every 58 minutes. The production line was 1.25 miles long. I don't know, 40, 50,000 employees there. It was magnificent the way they changed things in a big hurry. The other thing was our military had figured out how to make the other side feel that we were better than we were. Take Doolittle's raid on Tokyo, you know, on Japan. 16 B-25 bombers. They didn't carry enough bombs to make much difference, but it impressed the Japanese that we were coming. We're going to get you. And the same way with the Germans. when they saw, you know, you're flying over, you lose 5, 6 airplanes, and the next day you got just as many in the air. We had spare airplanes, spare engines, spare parts, lots of gasoline. One of the things I did, some of you that are younger or environmentalists won't like this, but when my dress slacks got dirty, I took a 5-gallon bucket of 100 octane gasoline, rinsed them out until the spots came out, poured the gasoline on the ground. That was in Italy. There was a lot of everything. We were well supplied. Now, the dietitians could have done a little better job, but it was hard to get food there, you know. Powdered eggs and powdered milk. Oy. You don't want to eat those. They didn't measure up. I don't know how they are today. I guess they're pretty good, but boy, they weren't too good then. Spam, yeah. I think Spam tastes pretty good today. I got pretty sick of it. Spam, powdered eggs, powdered milk, and orange marmalade. That's the only kind of jam we ever had, was orange marmalade. I can't figure out why that was, but that's what we had.
You know, back in the worst second, I was about 10 years old. In front of the generation, that I believe that the people of the United States and the Air Force and the Army and all the people, they contributed one more to a lot of ammunition and metal. They had scrap drives and they had rubber. We used to go out and we would pick up rubber for a penny a pound. And we went to this big tire company, and the guy whose backyard was scrap metal, scrap tires. And he says, go on out there and clean up the yard. I'll give you a penny. So we had 500 pounds, we need $5. But then you got all this stuff that went to the factories that built the airplanes, like I said. They're putting out airplanes, they're putting out ships. So I think in a way that the greatest generation is World War II soldiers and sailors and Marines and so on. But it's also the people of the United States that went there and built war material for the guys to use. Otherwise, they make 3 airplanes a month. They were making, like he said, they were making hundreds, thousands a month. And the jobs were like 12 hours a day. And they had all these people. So they were making that kind of money. They were making about $1 an hour on the progressive. Before that, my dad, he only made about 35 cents an hour for his work. And he worked for WP over the American. But I really think that way that the people of the United States, the fact that the soldiers, the sailors, they were the greatest generation.
Can you imagine trying to get everybody together like that today?
I think you could. I have a very optimistic outlook on the American public today. One of the things I find a lot of people my age and maybe a little younger find fault with young people. I sit out here under this B-17 and I talk to a lot of fabulous young people, a lot of kids that just are wonderful. I talk to people in our military. Man, are they well trained. I'm rather optimistic about the coming generation. I think they are so smart. Now, you know, when they read a history book, and I've seen, not all history books are this way, but I've seen some in high school that have 2 chapters on Marilyn Monroe and 2 paragraphs about World War II. You see, you can't blame the kids. The key to the young people today are their parents. The kind of kids that come to see these airplanes, they got good parents that are interested in them. My parents, my dad had a 3rd grade education, my mother an 8th grade education. And whenever there was a conference at the school with the teacher, they were both there because they wanted me to get an education. And I did start the college. And by the way, I didn't get a bachelor's degree till I was 58 years old. Back there, excuse me. Back there, yes, sir.
Since we're flying B-17s, you were doing mostly strategic bombing. Did you guys, with you and your crew, did you guys ever talk about collateral damage or maybe some of the, and do you have any sense of like how accurate you guys were able to get your bombing runs?
Yeah. We were rated two ways. How many bombs fell 1,000 feet from the center of the target and 2,000 feet from the center of the target. Today, a B-1 or any of the fighter planes that we have could put a bomb right in this window. Now, you got to remember, we were bombing huge targets. Any of you that travel Highway 52 to Rochester see that big oil refinery on the right. That's a miniature oil refinery compared to the ones we bombed. So if you hit within 1,000 or 2,000 feet, you still did a lot of good. But that's the way we were rated in those days. So today it sounds pretty primitive. It was very, very accurate for that time in history. You know, we're talking about 70 years ago, 1940s, long time ago. Yes, sir.
There's an old Canadian author, Farley Mowat, who was in World War II. He wrote a book called "And Over and sang about his infantry work in Italy." And one of the things that you say that, you know, it changes you very quickly. You talked about a period of months, but he's probably one of the most famous storytellers and writers in the world, certainly in Canada. But in that book, he talks about when he first went over as many young men, in 18, 20 years old, they're just gung-ho, and so they landed in Sicily, and then when Sicily was like a month and a couple of weeks later, they were going to embark to go to Italy. And he said just in 1 month, the drastic change of fear that came over him, and just was totally, he still did it, but so what did you, how long before you started feeling that, and what did you do to alleviate your fears?
We were trained to do a job, and that's what we had to do. And my opinion was that we were extremely well trained. The people that trained me, I think, did a fabulous job. The other 9 members of my crew were extremely well trained. Our pilot, 28 years old, was a great guy on the ground. We had a lot of trouble, boy, when we were in the air. He was Mr. Iron Britches. Because you know, in an airplane, whoever's in the left seat, doesn't matter what their rank is, that's the airplane commander. And boy, he really was tough when we were in the air. No monkey business. And I think that generally went through the service. You really never get used to being people shooting at you. You know, one of the auxiliary answers to your question, the young gentleman back there, some people say, you guys are pretty mean, you bomb civilians. You got to remember this. They were trying to kill us, and we were trying to kill them. And I did a lot of things at age 20 that I couldn't do today. You know, my spirit has softened greatly. Last weekend I was at an air show at Flying Cloud. There's a former ME-109 pilot that comes to that dressed in his Nazi uniform. He's been a U.S. citizen for 55 years. He's contributed a lot to our economy and to our country. He hates Germany. Well, he's a buddy of mine. You know, we're trying to kill each other in World War II, but that's past now. We got to get over that, and that's why I can't figure out why we want to fight wars all the time. That's not good.
Your
production up here, is that going to be available to organizations?
Yeah, sure. You know, if anybody wants a copy, I can give you a card after this, and just send me a phone call or an email.
I'm the commander of the American Legion here in Italy, and we've got all these stories, you know, paratroopers, you know, all these, and I like to, you know, at our meetings, just talk about it. A lot of them you can't get any talk, or even just members in the city.
And some of us, like me, talk too much.
So, but you would really like to get them to. Some of them, no, I'm not going to come. I'm not going to hear you. I'm not going to talk. You know, but I think it's good what the father and
Vince, yeah.
Because
They're very great
this is
storytellers.
so important for the youth. I know the American Legion. I put in all the libraries around here. There's a series of books that Al Zidane has put together, and it's all about the Minnesota. People went to war, and there's this great stories, and everybody really needs to know. Because they're going to do their things too.
I was commander of the Post 168 in White Bear Lake when I was 28 years old.
Thank you.
If anybody wants to see this again or share it with others, all you have to do is go on Google, type in the tail gunner and the Navigator, and it'll pop up. It'll be the top thing that pops up. Click on it, just copy the URL, and just email it around, share it. We don't have any marketing budget, so we just rely on word of mouth. So share it with your friends, put it on your Facebook page, or however else you can share it.
Damian, from this production, what did you take away on how to create the next one or the next? Obviously, this was the first one in the series. What process do you see yourself improving or changing for the next 2 or 3 in the series?
Well, I think we're going to be more efficient. You know, there's several other, you know, we kind of created a formula on this one that worked out really well. You know, each one's going to be a little bit different, of course, but, you know, another thing that never was actually put in the movie that we talked to Bob about a lot is that I wanted to go on just on Bob alone. It was just going to be the Navigator, because not only was he a navigator in World War II, of course, but he also was a financial planner and navigated people through financial times. And he also has won awards for his work in the prisons, you know, the worst prisons, navigating people through, you know, their spiritual lives. And so he's just kind of been a navigator his whole life. And that was one of the stories I wanted to tell. But in the end, you know, we tried things out, and trial and error we ended up with this. I think we're going to be more efficient.
I've been leading Bible studies in prison for over 33 years with Chuck Colson's organization, Prison Fellowship. And let me tell you, there's another place where you get a far different opinion of the men that are there. And I speak of men because I've never gone to a women's prison, than what the public thinks. Did you have a question, sir?
I had one more question.
Yeah.
Years ago, I listened to an interview with a guy who was 105 years old, and they asked him, in that amount of time, what is your greatest memory? And he thought for a bit, and he says, you know, when you go to 4th of July parades, they have all the different, you know, there's the World War II, and then there's the Korean, and then you have all the different vets, and there's fewer and fewer as you go further back. He said, I remember going to a parade and watching both the blue and the gray march in the same parade. To me, that's quite a memory. If you have to pick out something, a memory, not just World War II, but a memory from your lifetime.
Will you help me interview these guys in the future?
By the way, I would love to.
I guess my memory would be of the wonderful life that I had before the war and since the war. I'm just amazed at how I've been blessed during my lifetime, and to the great progress I've seen from the time of, I just a year ago gave my 1925 Model T Ford to my youngest daughter, who lives up in Wyoming, up at Chisago City. I had that since 1950. But so I have seen great advances, and I don't agree with all of them, but overall it's been a marvelous time in history. The thing that impresses me most about how things have advanced is medical care. I wouldn't be here if it weren't for the Mayo Clinic. I've got a pacemaker, I've got several other conditions that they're able to take care of, and I think the medical care is just fabulous. And I don't want this to be political, but I think if the government kept their hand out of it, we'd even be further along in our I'm impressed with the way men and women in medical care, how serious they are about their taking care of patients.
So, Bob, every time that I work on one of these projects and talk to veterans, you guys are all just so grateful to have people who want to hear your stories and people who are willing to tell the stories. Maybe you could tell us just a minute, like, what's that like for you? What does that do for you, being in a room filled with people who are, you know, just really captivated by what you have to say?
Dale DeMasi, everyone, he's also one of our crew.
Well, you know, when I came here Friday afternoon, as I walked from my car and got a look at that B-17, it seemed like I felt 50% better. And then when I began to see lots of people that I know, there's a gentleman sitting back there that used to have me come to his school and speak, and that always peps me up to talk to young people. And I've talked in public schools, private schools, home schools, churches, civic organizations, and that always makes me feel better. The American public is a great bunch of people. Man, they're nice people. I think of all the people in my business. I never talk to anybody that's not nice to me. Everybody's nice. And I think that's a great thrill, and that makes you feel better all the time.
Yeah, we came in late. Where were you stationed? You were in the European theater, but whereabouts were you stationed?
I was at Foggia, Italy, about 5 miles northwest of Foggia, and Foggia is about 1/3 of the way from the heel of the boot to the northern border of Italy, of 12 miles in from the Adriatic Sea.
Did you fly over Pulaski?
5 times.
5 times?
Yes, sir. That was a harrowing experience. You know, at Pulaski we used to have smoke and flames 30,000 feet in the air. We go back 3 days later and they're operating at full tilt. Now the Romanians were running those oil fields, but they had German guns in their back, and so they better perform. And they did. They really know how to take care of those oil fields. And we had to probably maybe 50% destroyed when the Russians took over at the end of August. And of course that cut the oil off completely. And I think the Germans probably got 50% of their oil from the Pulaski fields. The big refineries there were built by Standard Oil and Shell in the late 20s and the early 30s, and were taken over by Hitler in the early 30s. Yes, sir.
It's not a question. My father was also a navigator at the 15th station in Foggia, but his name you will never remember because his name is the most common name, John Smith or whatever. Do you remember?
John Smith?
You remember? And he was Ira Akers' navigator for several missions, especially the one that went to Russia, Russia. Do you remember the Ira Akers mission to Russia to meet the Russian Air Force or whatever?
No, some of that happened before I started, and most of it happened afterwards. I finished in September 12th, 1944, so I didn't get the privilege of going to Berlin.
Yeah. I met you about a year ago, and I still got you have a book or some, it's like a pamphlet type of thing? I'm not sure.
Well, there's a book written about 33 of us. It's called The Greatest Generation of Silver Wings.
Okay.
It's on sale in the 8th Air Force.
Everything you said is exactly what my dad said. Everything you said. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
You talked a lot about your training. How long was your training? And how great it was?
Well, I entered the service in early November 1942, and I was commissioned as second lieutenant and got the wings of an aerial navigator in February 1944. So that's about 15 months, December, January, February, 15 months. And you know, on an airplane, on a B-17, as on a B-24, there were 6 enlisted men and 4 officers, but that didn't make any difference. We fraternized together. In the Air Force, we forgot all the military baloney. We were there to win the war, and we had a job to do, particularly in the air. Now, my focus was pretty narrow. I didn't know much about the war in Europe until afterward. I've learned a lot about it. Maybe some of you go to the World War II roundtable at Fort Snelling, September through May. That's where you really hear a lot about what happened in World War II, both in the Pacific and in Europe.
Bob, a lot of people are starting to learn more about what it took to get the aircraft over the target. And tell us about your largest group that you participated in, and how long it took to stage that group before you actually started the mission to the target.
In the 15th, we usually flew either 24 or 28 aircraft in a group. Now, a group is 4 squadrons. We flew in formation, as you noticed on the film. And in the 15th, there were 6 groups of B-17s and 15 groups of B-24s. Now, the 8th Air Force could put about 1,000 bombers in the air at one time. We could put 500 or 600. Can you imagine if you're out here at 5 o'clock when they fly this, the B-24 and the B-17, if you can imagine 1,500 or 1,600 of those at one time flying over Germany or one of the occupied countries. And when we got through with them in the daytime, the British were back at them at night. Now, it was a horrendous effort to put all of this together. One of the things, it took about an hour to get to altitude and in formation. If you can imagine 24, 28 airplanes in a group rallying around a pylon, going round and round and round, climbing altitude all the time. And generally, we got in the formation at somewhere between 8,000 and 12,000 feet. At 8,000 feet on the way to the target, we usually put on our oxygen mask. Coming home, we took them off at 12,000. But it took a lot of time, about an hour usually, and then we started toward the target. And we'd climb for, depending on whether we were 8,000 or 12,000 feet, probably for an hour before we got to fly altitude. We bombed somewhere usually between 22 and 27,500 feet. Now in the summertime at 25,000 feet, it was 30 to 40 below zero. The guys that flew in the wintertime, it was 60 to 70 below zero. Now, you're not in an aircraft that's heated. It's not pressurized cabin. You're sucking on an oxygen mask and you got a heated suit. You got an airplane that's got the same kind of electrical system as your cars do today. It was 12 volt. And you plug this suit in. Most of the time it worked pretty good. If it didn't, you had the sheepskin clothing with the leather outside. You had that along to put on in case the heated suit didn't work. When you got somewhere between 6 and 15 or 20 minutes from the target, you got to the IP, the initial point. That's where you opened the bomb bay doors, and from there you flew straight and level. You got rid of the fighters there. The German fighters didn't want to fly through their own flak, but then the flak got tough. And there was flak at every target. Sometimes there weren't fighters at every target, German fighters opposing you, but there was always flak. And flak, most of the time, left a hole in the airplane about this big around. Most of it. You know what flak is? It's a 88 or 105 millimeter artillery shell, mostly 88. 88 millimeter shell is about this long, It's about this big around, it weighs 30 pounds. Half of it is full of junk, cast iron and steel, and the other half is full of explosives. It was set to go off at the altitude we were at, or when it hit your plane. Now, how did they know our altitude? They knew our altitude by the contrails. That hot engine coming out with the cold air left a contrail. You see it now when you see jets fly over. And that's how they knew our altitude. So they were all set up. And they didn't fire much at one plane. They just put up a barrage, and we had to fly through that barrage. Now, the tough part came when you came off the target. If you got shot up, the German, you became a straggler. You couldn't keep up with the formation. That's when the German fighters liked to get at you, is when you were flying alone.
Did you ever have to bail out?
I didn't, no. I never got a scratch. I've lived a charmed life. Yes, sir.
You said that your best memories are before the war and after the war. And of course, we're here to hear some of your wisdom and knowledge. And shifting to some of your wisdom, we've been in war for 10 years. What if you could say, hey, I'd sit down with some kids coming back from Iraq or Afghanistan, what are things that you would say to those young soldiers?
Well, maybe it'd be prehistoric. We're often asked when we speak in a school, what did you do when you got home? 3 things. In this order. You got a job, you got married, and you had kids. In that order. I can't think of a lot of other things I could tell them. You got to remember, those men and women that are coming home today were in a far different war than we were in. We knew who the enemy was. And so I can't put myself in their place because it's just altogether different.
Well, thank you all for coming today. If you have any questions, Bob will be out in our to ski out in the tent with the 8th Air Force. Contact Damian for copies of the program.
Watch on YouTube where I can get you a copy as well.
Yeah.
I just, one more time for Bob Clemens. He's a real great player.